Hi and welcome. I would like to present to you Rakine's system. Today's topic is AutoPlay and AutoCue. First, I'll be showcasing using 3D production module. In the previous software version, if we wanted to use automatic playback of files, for example Media 1, then we had to go to a specific tray, in this case tray of Media 1, to turn AutoPlay on. Now, in its place, the AutoCue feature can be found. Also, by pressing Media or Still buttons on Preview bus, a corresponding media tray will open automatically. Above the program bus, we can see a line of checkboxes. That's one place where AutoPlay is now being navigated from. Automatic playback will be executed when corresponding button on program bus is chosen. Let's try it for Media 1. I'm enabling AutoPlay with the checkbox above. You can see how the access for this feature is now much easier. A file in Media 1 is currently not playing. After making a transition from preview to program, playback of the file starts automatically. Each transition to Media 1 on program activates the playback from the beginning or from the mark-in marker if it's been set up. AutoPlay can also trigger playback of a sequence of files if Play All is chosen. The feature can also be used with still images. A single image will always be displayed when chosen, of course. However, we can create a sequence of images and choose playback time for each one. From my disk, I'll add a few images to this media tray. To find Set Playback Time option, right-click on an image. For each file, we can set a separate playback time. By clicking Play All, we create a sequence of images. The total time of this sequence playback is 18 seconds. After transition from preview to program, automatic playback of this sequence will begin. Each transition to Still 1 will trigger the playback from the beginning. Configuring AutoPlay is now easier than it used to be because checkboxes are placed directly above the sources. You can enable and disable AutoPlay at any time. Sources of media or still graphics don't have to be used at full screen only. We can also use them inside a virtual studio. In the 3D production module, production is made with 4 virtual cameras, but using one virtual studio. That's why virtual cameras are treated as one group, and therefore ABCD Mixer is mutual for all virtual cameras. On ABCD Mixer, we can choose sources for virtual monitors, and that's also where we can find checkboxes for AutoPlay, specifically when using VCs. Each program entry of a group of VC buttons will trigger automatic playback of a file or a sequence when AutoPlay function on ABCD Mixer is enabled. As an example, I will enable AutoPlay for Media 1. Let's do preview to program transition from Media 2 on full screen to VC1 to see how Media 1 with enabled AutoPlay will behave. Right now, Media 1 file is stopped. After preview to program transition, the file's playback begins. Switching between different VCs will not cause automatic playback from the beginning. That's because we're still in the same studio and only the positions of virtual cameras change. While using AutoPlay, we recommend to not transition from full-screen file playback, for example from a Media 1 to VC consisting the same media, to avoid a visible jump back to the beginning of the playback. As you can see, AutoPlay checkboxes have also been added above cam inputs. This is useful when we choose a media file as a source of cam input. By choosing Movie in Input Configuration settings, we can use a pre-recorded video as a cam input. I choose a video of a presenter standing on a green screen. Signal like that can go through chroma keying. After uploading a file, it's going to be played in a loop. Since AutoPlay checkbox is enabled, choosing Cam 1 on program bus will trigger file playback from its beginning. Of course, any kind of media files can be used as a cam source. And such file can also be placed inside a virtual studio for example on a virtual monitor. To do that, choose a correct cam input on the ABCD mixer. Additionally, AutoPlay can be activated on a DSK layer. You can notice AutoPlay checkboxes above DSK buttons. Automatic playback will happen when the source appears in the program window, so when the DSK button lights in red. To make it work, first we need to choose DSK source, for example text 1. For a still image, we need to set a playback time. I'll add a few images to create a sequence. We need to remember to tick Play All. Now, to trigger automatic playback on DSK layer, we need to make a transition from preview to program. As you can see, the playback began automatically. If loop option has not been chosen for the sequence, then the playback will stop at the last image in the sequence. It's important to remember to enable or disable loop option in media trays depending on what is needed. Last feature connected to AutoPlay is Lock, located at the left corner of Program Bus. By ticking the checkbox, all chosen AutoPlay configurations will be remembered, but making changes will be disabled. That feature helps avoiding any mistakes during production. All changes and setups made are saved in a session file, but remember to save the session before exiting. Now we will discuss AutoPlay function in 2D production module. For full-screen sources, AutoPlay works exactly the same way as in 3D production module. The checkboxes are located above Program Bus. The difference is with virtual cameras, because it's possible to upload different Virtual Studio sets to each VC. That's why each VC has its own ABCD mixer and AutoPlay settings. For VC1, I'll choose Media 1 and assign it to Source A. And I'll enable AutoPlay by ticking the box above. For VC2, I'll choose Media 2. And again, I will enable AutoPlay. Every transition between full-screen sources to VC will trigger AutoPlay, no matter if it's auto or take transition. Transitioning between different VCs, for example VC1 to VC2, will also trigger automatic playback from the beginning. That's because each VC in 2D production module is treated independently. For each VC, we can use a different shot of the same Virtual Studio or up to 4 completely different scenographies. Remember that ABCD Mixer and AutoPlay has to be configured for each VC separately. Now, let's proceed to another new feature, AutoCue. It automatically triggers a transition between program and preview after a file's playback or play all sequence finishes. AutoCue checkbox can be found in media trays. I'll use a tray for Media 1 as an example. I'm ticking AutoCue checkbox. I'll also tick AutoPlay for Media 1 so that the playback starts automatically. And I'm executing the preview to program transition. Video from Media 1 tray plays from the beginning in the program window. After a completed playback, AutoCue will automatically trigger a transition to our chosen source in the preview bus. Let's repeat this transition again. AutoPlay triggers the playback. Let's change our source on preview bus. I'll put it on VC3. When the video in Media 1 ends, program is switched to VC3. AutoCue feature works for all full-screen sources, so also for still 1 and 2. I'll add a few more files to create a sequence using Play All function. You can see that AutoCue is now available. For automatic start, I'll take AutoPlay for still 1 on the PGM bus. And I'm making a transition from preview to program. When the playback of this sequence finishes, an automatic transition will be triggered. And what's currently in the preview window will appear in the program window. AutoCue only works when the loop option is disabled. When loop is on, files playback will be renewed and played over and over again until stopped manually. In this case, AutoCue will not be triggered. That's why it's important to pay attention to these matters. That's all for today. See you next time.
Wrecking. Keen on record.